Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I just want to say thank you so much to Nikki and Andrew and Brandy also for organizing this summit and for all the layers of work that they've been doing to make this possible. I really appreciate it. Today's topic, redefining legacy, can be a bit of a loaded one. I think there's a lot of tradition and contains space to it. And so I really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to any questions or comments and what your own perspectives are on legacy. Before I get started, I'll introduce a little bit of my background and why I'm here in this summit. When I first started noticing being othered, if you will, as a woman without children, was around the time that I left my marriage. And I was going through a long, awful legal engagement around my divorce. And the comments that people made to me were very interesting. I was grieving my marriage. I was grieving actually not having a child, although at that time I still thought I may have children, just not within that marriage. And people really belittled my experience of divorce and the legal process that I was engaged in for many years because there were not children involved. And years into that process, when I actually needed services, I ended up being a pro se, meaning representing myself in court after my resources had run out from a long-term divorce. I wasn't able to access those services, and I was told quietly or behind closed doors or just matter-of-factly that it was because I didn't have a child. So I began questioning how we value women without children and just what is the value of my life by itself without being in relationship to someone else, as a wife, as a sister, as a mother. And particularly this area, well, what happens to women without children when they also need those services? And later in my life, I've been in a relationship for several years with somebody who already had children and did not want any more children. He didn't have a particularly good experience having children. He had a lot of challenges, and understandably so. So that was when I really delved into my journey of grief and kind of rediscovering myself and changing my narrative around legacy, always believing that I wanted to and would do something that had a positive impact on the world in some way. And so I'd always carried that with me, but what that looked like and who I became and how I considered things changed. And so that's a little bit about what I want to speak to today. Okay, sorry, I was just looking at the chat. So legacy, what I would like to start by asking you is just what comes up when you hear that word? How do you hold the term legacy? Or how do you define it? Is there a feeling that it evokes, or somebody that you think of, or something that you think of? Is there a pressure that emerges? Is there an excitement? I'm curious how we hold this in our community. For me, someone said, for me, it evokes the idea that I existed. Legacy is something that is left behind of us that our community and family remembers us by. Yes. Yes, how we are remembered. Yes. And legacy is the term legacy and how we relate to it culturally and socially has so been intertwined with family traditionally, right? The inheriting things, the legacy of a family's wealth, or creating a big legacy in somebody's name, and with the assumptions that that is how we will be remembered. And it must be magnanimous, we must be recognizable, like an Oprah or Mother Teresa. There are a lot of assumptions or feelings, I think, that at least that I went to as well, that, well, if I'm not having a child, yes, I had this idea that I would do something, but now what? Now I really have to. Yes, passing on family stories and family traditions, absolutely. Again, back to this family line of tradition, inheritance, knowing who somebody was, family trees. We're all asked to do those in schools, like what happens to our branches? What happens to our stories? And do we really know what others have lived who are on those trees, is a great question. Or does it remain static? And who will hold our stories? Who will hold our possessions, I think, is a big one. As I've come into, I'm about to turn 50 next year, and ridding possessions that I thought I would give, to my children, or at least share those things. So what value? Not only, yes, speaking to issues of worth and value. If those things aren't valued, you can even start there. If those things aren't going to be valued by someone, then the question, will I be valued by someone? How will I be remembered by someone? Because this lineage of having children has been so the set map of how we are remembered, or people saying that children are our legacy. My child is my legacy, which first is a very deep projection of, onto a child. It's a very heavy projection. We're all our own individuals living our own lives. And yet this has been an accepted thing that, yes, having a child is our legacy. So check mark, I'm done. So how will we be remembered? What will be our legacy? And what I want to talk to today about is not necessarily creating, in the way that we see legacy, as creating something monumental or making our mark in a way that no one can miss, to fill that space of wanting to, having conceived children in our hearts, but more in a way of everyday legacy. How do we choose to treat ourselves? How do we relate with others? And thereby, those actions, how do we impact the world? In what ways? I think choosing to look at legacy allows us to be intentional in that. And yet, what are some of the fallacies around what legacy is in this way that, if we're saying that legacy to us is about being remembered, is it true that we won't be remembered if we don't have a legacy? If we don't have a named legacy or a recognized legacy? So what is the other layer of what legacy means here? Is it just somebody remembering us, or is it in a certain way? What does that mean? Do you believe that you will have a legacy without having a child and without creating something very intentional? I believe so. I believe it's the way that we live our lives and the way that we value this one life that we have. I do believe that we are whole as we are, and that each of our lives are as precious and as valuable as the other. Somebody says, I think I have to know it within myself rather than through others. That's the difference for me now, but I don't know how. Yes, I think, when we grow up with a narrative of what is possible around having children, it affects every part of our life. It's this complete mind map, like for the world, for our entire life. And when that map is no longer, once there's not a child there, it's like that tree, those branches, it changes. It's a whole different, it can become a whole new map, a whole different tree. And so how do we create that? We first have to come to know ourselves. It's not a matter of finding a way to just fill that space, but really getting to know who we are now on this side of it, because this experience is with us, this grief is with us. Our everyday interactions impact us for the rest of our life. Our grief may change, our acceptance may change, but it is something that we are going to live with, and who we become not wholly because of that, but in large part because of that, is who we need to look at. I'd like to do a lifestyle now. Somebody says, I like the idea of our legacy starting now in terms of the impact we have on people in our lives. Yes. I think these, you know, for many years I've had a company, I do coaching, and it's called One Legacy Coaching. And I've had a lot of interesting conversations about that term, from people saying, well, why would you use the word legacy? That's just made up. It's a human thing. Like, there's no real thing. To the ideal of one legacy being connected, which is where I'm coming from. I work with horses and energy, and the connection of that and how it reverberates throughout, you know, our lives, how it affects us, how it affects our partners and relationships, our communities, and the world, really, and looking at one legacy as being the outcome of all those actions, the impact of all those actions. So it's not just the pinnacle of something that we create, it's all those little actions in between and who supports us. So it's very much a living thing. It is a living narrative, a living choice, and living actions that affect. Let's see, look at the comments. We may not see our legacy as clearly as through children, but I believe everyone I come into contact may carry a small fingerprint of us. Therefore, who we are and how we carry is our legacy, how we carry ourselves. Absolutely, beautifully. I think that living in this space of not having children, and as women in this constant container of comparison around being parents or non-parents as women, it's very easy to forget that, to think that it has to be something bigger, other, more, different, so unique. And those are beautiful things too. Creating those things is beautiful. But if we don't value what is right now, then how do we move through that? And how do we remind ourselves of the impact that we're making? A lot of what I think about today, having come on this side of accepting my childlessness and what does the rest of my life look like, I think about our collective legacy as well. When we are making those, how did you say it? A small fingerprint on people, how we're impacting, how we're imprinting. It's such a beautiful thing to be intentional about. We get to be very intentional about that. And when I look at things collectively from the point of view of this community or being part of this community, I think about small things. For example, back to the tradition of inheritance and family legacy. I had a life insurance policy that I've had since I was a child. And I was going to change the heir on that policy. However, because it was not a child of mine, or there wasn't blood relation, there wasn't a legal connection, I wasn't able to do that. And I kept working with the agency until they found a way. And they actually did have a way within it. They had just never looked at it that way. And those are small things. It was one person, it was me, but the person on the other side now has that information. Those are small, powerful impacts that we are making. The new legacy of who we are is how we get to choose and be in relationship to our childlessness, who we get to be as women within this and make those choices. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think too about everyday things in terms of language. I think many of us, if not most, just as I witness so often, from the time we're children, we're told when you have children, not if you have children or if you would like to have children. And so there's this assumption, there's this ingraining of this from the time we're born, where we can change that language. We can do some emotional correctiveness on that, if you will, in terms of asking children what they want. It's being models and stories of what is possible, whether we chose it or not. How our pain was is not the comparison, but that we are here and what we are doing with our lives, who we are, how our language is changing, how our actions are changing, and who we get to be. Let me see. Nikki says, giving your insurance agent the knowledge that this is possible is a huge change. Yeah, it's those small things that are what I pay attention to now. You know, I had to change my own legacy narrative around, I must do this big thing. And I always kind of held that. And now I realize that it is those small things. I think Nikki earlier in the week had a video about how do we make change without alienating. And that's a hard one for me. I'm like, you know, bull in the china shop, like, here I come, you better make a separate waiting room because this is hurting people, you know, in the gynecological world. But having said that, it's those small conversations, the people that are working in those infrastructures that are really powerful. And they open doors for the rest of us. And they change the conversation for those who are coming after us. Sorry, just a moment. Yes, making the infertility and involuntary childlessness experience more humane and less invisible, for those who come behind us, like you did with your life insurance action. To me, that's legacy in a way. Another quote here. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and I think the reason I'm even speaking to this today is not only my own experience, but I've had so many clients, you know, the loss of a child or not having a child, the desire to fill that space so immediately, even before we've grieved, it's just so natural. It's so natural. It's like this switch was shut off. I'm going to turn one on over here. That's where our heart goes because that's who we are. And it has a lot to do with that beautiful energy of why we wanted that connection in children in the first place. That doesn't go away. That mother within or parent within is still there, and she wants to express that. And so as we navigate, we get to know all the things that, you know, didn't sit well with us, or where we were, you know, a life insurance policy being shut down, or being in the gynecologist's office. All those things that we experience on a daily basis, to me, those are the things that we have the power to change. And it doesn't mean that you have to go in and change that when you're grieving and you're at your appointment. But when you're at a space and a capacity, or when it's somebody else in the community can support you in doing that, whether it's writing a letter or having a conversation with that physician or the admin, these are really powerful spaces that we get to live in, and we get to live in them out loud as we're able to. I think I've been thinking a lot about our community in terms of, and around legacy in terms of like the Milky Way, you know, with the stars, how all the stars have a different twinkle and a different brightness. And depending on when, it can change. Those roles can change to a degree, right? And so I don't think it's that we all have to become these shining stars and, you know, do a repeat Oprah in our own way to prove ourselves as women. That's crap. It is about how do we get to live our best lives as who we are? How are we meeting our relationship with not having children? And in doing so, how are we again affecting ourselves, others, and the world at large just by those small daily actions, from everything from self-care, which I know is going to be spoken about and has been in this summit this week. Self-care is an active legacy in my assessment, because you are shifting something. You are shifting from a community that has been largely invisible to even seeing yourself first and being able to see others. All of those things create impact. All of those things create everyday living legacy in my assessment. Okay, I'm talking a lot. So are there any questions or comments or confusion? Nikki says, self-care is an active legacy. That's a wonderful idea and something I'm going to embrace. Yes, I think anytime we're embracing this whole life of ours, this singular life, regardless of our relational status, regardless of our roles in a community or our jobs or titles, anytime we are embracing that and loving that, particularly given the history and the everyday sociocultural things that we butt up against, that it is really a beautiful beginning of the shift. For yourself, but when you do that, you change things for other people. It's what people observe. And it's not about perfection or now I must be this really incredible person because I don't have children. It's about being honest in those phases, and that is self-care. It's not about everything looking good and doing all the right things. Sorry, let me go back to here. What you said about honoring ourselves is so important, and how we choose to live our legacy, our own legacy versus thinking what we must do really huge things. I have many friends who talk about their children is not their only legacy. So why do we feel as childless people we have to match our childless legacy with something so huge, or our lives were less meaningful? Absolutely. What a brilliant point. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I can't see your name on there, but thank you for that. You're absolutely right. And it's a beautiful question. And so part of why I want to talk about legacy is how do we take ourselves out of that traditional container? You know, we're not on that same map. And so that comparative space as well. Brilliant that parents are acknowledging that too. We have parents that are on that track where this is what it looks like. And if that's not their legacy, I mean, I know many women, women and men, but particularly the women in my life who are very conscious parents. I love those women. I know who they are with and without their children. I absolutely know who they are, and they're reflective of what you're talking about here. And it's a great question. Why are we holding ourselves to that standard? We don't need to. We don't need to. And in tracking those everyday things for ourselves, for others, how we speak or how we shift the environments that we interact in to not be so invisible, and to be met where our needs are. There are real needs in our community. We don't have to just take the back seat all the time to parent and be like, well, it's okay, you know, you go first, or of course that matters more. No, we matter. And when we do that, those things start leading us to who we are now in this life and what becomes important. And there's an organic process that happens. So it's not so much sitting down and creating legacy. It is about living it and what emerges from that, whatever that looks like, in whatever size. And if you affect one person, you have created that vibration of change and remembrance. Let me just look at the comments. I think just now the CNBC community is creating a legacy and bringing the whole issue forward to society today, and this action will be known by those that will follow. I wonder if it would be useful exercise to ask those around us what they think our legacy is or will be. Absolutely. I think that's beautiful, and I think it's true. I think we're living at a very special time where we are coming together, where we're becoming more visible. That's why a few years ago, I wrote a very short book, and I remember telling Jody Day that it's like, well, this isn't really what, it's about. It's just, I have something small to say here, and I want to be supportive of people who have already, been visible and are speaking out, and here's this. And then, a few years later, I circled back to that and was like, okay, the things that matter to me, they matter, yes, because of the experience, and the things that matter in other domains of my life are also applicable to this. So it kind of came back full circle to, well, here's all of me right here. I don't have to go over there and do this. I wonder if it would be a useful exercise to ask those around us what they think our legacy. Yeah, beautiful. And I would love to ask that now, what your sense of this still is, for yourself, how that's shifted over time, or our collective legacy that I was speaking to. I do think it's a really, as I said, a powerful time to be looking at this, and also knowing that we're not alone. It doesn't have to be this lone legacy definition. We are in this collective, and we can shift roles. We can be the grieving person who has needs and requests support, and we can be the person, making the changes in the office, or doing a webinar, or writing a book. We don't all have to do the same things and not at the same time. It's an opportunity to honor where we are right now at any given time. And yes, along the lines of that exercise of asking others what they think our legacy will be, it's a beautiful point that I meant to speak to, in that I think this Maya Angelou said to Oprah Winfrey, and I'm sure many of you have heard this, when she asked, or when she was telling her about her legacy of her South African school being her legacy, Maya spoke to her about legacy, which is how I hold it in this living space, of being the summation of all the actions and interactions and impacts that you make on people. So we don't really know what it will be. It's up to other people, really, their response to what our legacy will be, which I think is an interesting piece within the family space as well. For example, in my family, in the inheritance space, I have one brother who has one child, and what I grew up thinking my whole life was going to be mine and my brother's, because my father had bought these properties, changed after my brother had a child. And the restrictions that are put on me, should he pass, are that I must give it then to my brother so it stays in the family. And legacy itself is a way for us to address our mortality, right? Or to create a thread of immortality, if you will. And so the assumptions of what we think that legacy is, because we want to define it and control it as that piece of not wanting to let go of that. We don't know what will happen in the next generation. We don't know what happens at those legal transactions, all of those things that I've had too much learning about that I never would have wished on anyone. But that too is interesting. And then when we hold ourselves as defining our legacy, do we really know? Or what can we really know? Nikki said, helping the people who are struggling now is my current legacy, and raising awareness and changing attitudes. Oh, I lost you. Oh, sorry. And changing attitudes is our longer term legacy to make life easier for people in the future. Absolutely, absolutely. Who we are right now and how we can support and help each other and make those environmental changes, those family language changes, wherever we can do that, supporting ourselves now. It's already changing so much. There are women who are already here right behind us, a couple of generations already at my age, that, what have they been told? What are they going to have to unlearn? And where will they go? Where will they go for that support, or just to have those conversations to figure it out, not to make automatic choices? Sorry, I can't see your name. I've made some larger goals for myself to attain to leave a legacy that aligns with my values. But I also have made a list of things that I value so that my beliefs, values, and actions in everyday life, as you spoke, will create my legacy without it. Beautiful, exactly. I know I will be remembered by these little things that touch others in very large ways sometimes. I take comfort and strength in these things and plan to reevaluate these lists periodically, because I presumably have more time and space than my more busy parent friends. I'm finding that I will use this time and space wisely. Very beautiful. Absolutely. And I think too, within that, there is that one comment I just want to make on that. It's beautiful. It does. It happens without trying. It doesn't mean not have these goals, or, don't set this lofty intentions. I hold them myself. It's not that there's anything wrong with doing that. It's, I think, when we dial it back to who are we right now and what are we paying attention to, what matters to us, and doing those things, it creates that, as you beautifully said. Thank you so much. I do want to address your comment about, I think it's another piece that plays into this, assumption or pressure that we must do something because we have more time or we have more resources, which oftentimes is true, and oftentimes is not true. And so I think too, at least for me, that's something that in my values I speak to because of those assumptions and because I've had that said to me, you know, well, of course that's easy, you don't have a child, or of course you have time, or of course you have the money. But we all have different experiences. We have different we have different traumas in our life, and not having a child in and of itself is a form of trauma. Having been told that you have the expected choice of something our whole lives and having that taken away is a trauma in its own right. And so how we're able to deal with that, what, you know, set our own capacities in motion differs from person to person, just like people with children. Yeah, I think I'm going to take a quick pause here and see if there are any questions or comments you'd like to share.
Hi, Christine and everyone. I'm just going to come back on for a moment and say we've had a few more participants join since we started. Okay. So welcome to all of you. And just to let you know that we do have a text chat going on where you can write comments and give feedback. And if you do want to take part in that, down at the bottom, there's a little speech bubble. If you click onto that, you can type your comments or questions over on the right-hand side. If you would like, Christine's doing a really good job at picking up on these, but if you've got a question you'd like to ask them anonymously, if you like, then you can always send a message via the chat privately to me, Nikki Fletcher. And I'm fascinated, I really am, Christine, and I love the fact I've been focusing so much on legacy in sort of mile-high letters, because that's always been a major issue, I realise, for me, that I'd actually forgotten that legacy just as little tiny letters is really important too. You know, so this has been a real eye-opener for me, so thank you very much for that.
Beautiful. And I will just say, with the comments, I have just not been saying people's names. Some I can't read, and just for privacy anyway, just as a double privacy. So if you accidentally hit something and you wanted to be anonymous, because I still don't know how to use this technology either, I won't say names. I've been outing Nikki, but that's it, okay?
That's great. And the other thing is just to reassure people again that anything which is typed over on the right side in chat doesn't appear in the recording at all either. So you know, we appreciate that this is a sensitive subject and your privacy, etc., is important to us. Right, I will see you again a bit later. Bye.
Let me see. Okay, yeah, I just welcome to anybody who's hopped on since we've been talking. I feel like I've been talking a lot. I usually do this in more of group conversation mode, so it's a little awkward for me. But thank you so much for your comments and insights. They're brilliant and they're beautiful, and it's very touching to see how many of you have thought through this in that way. I think it's really important, and you know, valuing our lives and our worthiness outside of, you know, traditional definitions that may or may not be true for anybody. You know, just because it's been done that way, inheritance is an example of that. Just because it's still followed that way by many people, or, you know, the auto plan of life kicks in and there's a constant comparison. It's time to step outside of that, and really, I think at this time in history, for this many of us to be in this community and to be coming together in different ways and acknowledging our grief, acknowledging our existence, becoming visible, I think we have the opportunity to shape things in ways that we don't even know yet. And it is starting in these everyday spaces. You know, we talk about sort of bypassing, you know, if you go from grieving and trying to move through acceptance and just into focusing on something else as a distraction, which is a really, you know, natural thing to do, we can lose ourselves. We're trying to get back to the self we were, and we're not that same person. You know, this is a chance to recognize each other as who we've become on these journeys. And it's all, you know, not rainbows and unicorns. There's a lot of pain and a lot of agony that is lifelong. There are mileposts that we live through that, you know, each of those brings a different grief or remembrance or touch. I was thinking about just as recently as a couple of weeks ago, talking about legacy and value and worth. I was recently nominated to be on a board of a local medical clinic. And it was like the week after I had joined the board, and I was doing things. I've been renovating. I was telling Nikki my office. I changed everything. I was doing little things that were really important to me to shift my space and my writing. And anyway, the day that I was supposed to meet with the head of the board, he didn't show up, and it was because his wife had a baby right at that time. And I, you know, for just that moment, I went, oh my gosh, I'm painting my office. You know, like they're on this journey, they're doing all these things. And I thought, no, but I only went there for a second, where that would have been days before. You know, that comparison space, the grief space, the what ifs, it's not about that going away and we replace it with a legacy, but we can live with it and express it. And for me, it was about rewriting that narrative as well to who do I want to impact and how? And it is us. I want to be here fully for this community in ways that I thought, no, I need to do everything. I need to serve everybody. And it has become this. And that doesn't mean it will be that for everybody. That's not what I mean. But for me, I really have made that intentional choice. And I thought, no, this is my full journey and I get to have this, and that's their journey. But, you know, there are those seconds in between, and that's going to happen, and that's okay. That's okay. We're living in a world that has completely different structures to our own lives, different narratives that we're not a part of. And not only are we not a part of, but we wanted to be. And so I empathize, and I just wanted to share that quickly. But it's not a matter of replacement. It is a matter of continuing to become who we are. Are there any questions that I can answer or comments? I feel like I've kind of talked all over the place. Or any questions you have for me, I'm happy to answer as well. Yes, Nikki said we have membership of a club that we didn't want to join. Absolutely, absolutely. But now it's going to be a really great club. I think all of that, acknowledging all of that, and yes, and a new membership. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, what should have been. I think the what should have been you're referring to is a bona fide piece of our lives and who we are in terms of, yes, in do you mean in terms of what should have been in terms of having children? Yes, I think it's, you know, as we talk about grief, not having a child, I think that we live with that forever. I mean, wherever you move, wherever place you are in your journey in terms of acceptance, I don't think that you don't ever have those moments of feeling something or wondering, or at least that hasn't been my experience so far. And I feel like I've, you know, been working with this for a time, but I don't, at least for me, that doesn't ever go away. There are still moments that I could breathe in, you know, a newborn or what, and wonder, you know, but it does get better and it changes, and energy is freed to do other things and to live in new ways. But I think definitely we hold that in our hearts and in this lifetime. Someone says, I think that as we start to value our own journeys as worthy and valuable, we will place more interest and effort into the journey as it is now and in the future. That's pretty powerful for us. Yes, thank you so much. I love the way you write these things. Thank you so much. What a beautiful contribution. Yes, it's very powerful. meeting what is right now, the constant what if and the angst of those spaces of not knowing are very real, and they need to be grieved, and they need to be acknowledged, they need to be remembered, they need to be ritualized, however that works for you. And to be able to do that in community or small groups is even more powerful. We see each other and we recognize each other in a way that, yes, is exclusive to this club. So we get to have that. Let me see. This year is the 100th year. Someone said that this year is the 100th year commemoration of the women's suffrage movement for the right to vote. They were pioneers then, and I think we are pioneers now. Yes, absolutely. I love that. It's funny, I was thinking about that the other day too, the suffrage. And I was thinking about legacy too, in terms of, as I spoke to about our collective legacy, I was thinking about all the things, what comes up automatically if we think about a person or a movement or an outcome. And if you take the suffrage movement as an example, or something that affects a lot of people, it wasn't one person. There are leaders and there are people acknowledged. There's so many things that happen along the way to support those things and to sustain them. And so we all have different roles to play in that. But I absolutely agree that we are pioneers, and we get to acknowledge, those role models or just women from the past, who maybe weren't acknowledged, and how we hold, how we go forward too. Who are we going to be how are we going to be in conversation with young women, with children? It starts when we're children. And if we're writing books or we're speaking, what language will we use? How will we say? What will we repeat, and what will we claim as ours? To make these choices and these circumstances and our lives visible, clear, acceptable, connectable, and loving, all of that to children and other women. This is really a lifelong journey, and so all of the points within our lives are touched by this. Somebody's, I'm gonna look at the comments. There's so many others who are either childless not by choice or will be. We will help make being childless, especially as women, not so awkward or unacceptable. Amen. Because we accept it. We accept as who we are and how we hold the hands of other women who will go through this. Yes, absolutely. There's so many spaces of self-rejection just in life in general, and depending on the culture and society that you're in. And this is a really core one. Accepting our lives and sharing our lives when we're able to, when we have that capacity, and when we feel confident to do that, is a really powerful thing for future generations and for each other, seeing each other. Really powerful. And I do think, as at this time, as our numbers are growing and who we are, I mean, it will become quite undeniable, our community. We're not currently still acknowledged, human resources spaces and other spaces that are so deemed as family friendly when they really mean children family or families with children. So even in that space, how we define family, how we utilize that language for ourselves. I have a family. I don't have children, but I have family, however you define that. But it does not just have to mean that. And I think that we keep repeating it in places and accepting that, doesn't really change things. Another one within the workplace especially is woman friendly, when they mean parent friendly. To me, it's just those distinctions. It's not against anyone else, but it is for us. It is about our visibility, and it's about taking our place, our community having its place in the larger society, out loud and in awareness. Are there any other comments or just things, anything that's shifted or anything you're still holding really strongly about legacy that you would like me to know. I would love to hear, how you hold this space of legacy. We will be the new educators who will help our community be accepted in this new world. Absolutely. I do think that's, I think it's a beautiful time and a beautiful opportunity to do that. And again, it can be done in small ways and loud ways when necessary. And I'm just thrilled. I mean, even just a few years ago, we all know of Jody Day's work and the community, but also, we have a magazine now, Nikki and Andrew's magazine. I've seen more and more faces that I'm like, wow, I didn't even know you were doing that just from this summit. And it just feels, I just feel so filled from that. I'm in awe of what women are doing, women and men. But what people are coming to this summit doing, I just, wow, it's out there, it's tangible, this is a real conversation. We're visible, I can see your face. It's just beautiful. Oh, thank you so much. And so you have to leave, but I'm really glad you could join us. Thank you so much. Somebody had to leave.
Hi, Christine. I thought I'd just jump on again. We've been talking about the changes that we're seeing at the moment and being educators and things like that. And I am so excited about what's going on within the community at the moment. It has changed so much in the past few years.
It really has.
And I just think every little tiny bit we are doing, no matter how small it is, we are, what is it they say? You're greater than the sum of its individual parts.
Yes.
I know that people keep on saying, stronger together and things. However, it is true. Yes. And as individuals, we're starting to get our own individual voice and starting to feel brave enough to speak out. And as those individual voices start to join together, that voice, collective voice, becomes louder. Absolutely. And the way I look at it is that 20 years ago, anything about mental health was a huge taboo. It really was. And you just didn't mention it. In the UK, you were scared to go to the doctor because you're depressed, because it would go onto your health records, and then that could be used against you in the future by future employers and things. And there have been such huge changes over the past few years about people's attitudes to mental health issues, which is brilliant. And what I see is happening is that we're where mental health issues were, 10, 15 years ago or something like that. And we're starting to get the conversations out there.
Yes. And also that, just the lack of awareness. The things that happen on daily interactions, but people just never stop to think about, and we're coming out of that same social container, for ourselves to not only grieve it, but then to move into something new and to share that lens is a really big deal. People just have never, if you've never had to think about it, you don't.
No. Andrew and I had an instance just about the time when we were launching the magazine back in December, where we knew we were going to a social event organised by I'm going to call her a friend, I'll be polite. And she had, over the years, she had said so many insensitive comments to us about our situation. And we were so excited about the magazine because we just launched it and we were going to this social event, and it was a case of, I hope it doesn't get spoilt by her insensitivity. And we thought, no, we're going to change what we do. We're excited about what we're doing and we're going to share it. And if she says anything, rather than just me meekly accepting it, I'm going to call her out on it.
No.
And 6 months ago, I would never have done that.
Yes. Yeah.
And when it did happen,
Oh, oh.
She came up to me and she said, "Hi, Nikki, how are you doing? Haven't seen you and Andrew around for a bit. Yeah, why is that? Yeah." And we said, "Oh, we're so busy. And yeah, what are you doing?" So I told her about the launch of the magazine, and she looked at me and she went, "Is there really a need for that? You know, I mean, I don't really, you know, I wish I hadn't had my," and I knew what she was going to say because she'd said it to me before. And I put my hand up and I looked her straight in the eye and I said, "Do not say that.
Nice.
So inappropriate what you're about to say."
Yes.
And she looked a bit shocked and she went,
Yes, they do.
"I suppose not. I won't say it then. I wish you all the best." And she sort of drunk the rest of her glass and said, "Oh, it's empty. I need to go."
Bye-bye.
And I felt so empowered by it because I'd got my point of view across. I'd been polite.
Yes.
And I knew that she could no longer hurt me with her comments at all.
Or the next person. She will.
Or the next person. Yeah, hopefully it's given her a shock and she goes, "Oh, I won't say it again."
Yeah, she won't be surprised by the next response that is not.
Yes.
Yeah, good. That's beautiful. Yeah, and there's, you know, as I said, there's a readiness to this. It's not that we all have to go out, you know, making declarations and, you know, be with where you are. And when you are, you know it. You know when you can hold that space and have others hold that space when you can't, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we are all in it together. And it's... I think it is time. It's our time. We need to be careful about how we do things as well, so that we don't alienate people, which is something I talked about in one of my sessions earlier in the week. And it's a case of doing what you feel you are able to do. And I think we all do. We go up and down with what we're capable of doing at any given time. And if we're feeling strong and enabled, empowered, then we will do something. And if we're not, then we need to listen to ourselves. And I think you said, self-care is a form of legacy as well. Accept that we need to take a back step sometimes as well.
So perhaps maybe the term is reclaiming legacy, for ourselves at all those levels. Yeah, and that things aren't linear, that now I grieve and then I accept and then I just go up and up. Things change as they do get better. But holding ourselves to that as well, that it's this woven path. You're constantly weaving what that is going to look like. Somebody says, I think that through this talk, I've thought more about my achievements and how others see those things as they lead perhaps more routine lives than what I can offer produces a legacy. And so looking, at the lens of, how others perceive that or how they're impacted by that or how you inspire, you never know what everyday acts or roles that you do. You don't know how that impacts people. They may never tell you, you may not know. There's invisible legacy in that way, the reverberation of those things. Someone else says, in this new world of diversity, accessibility, and acceptability, our voices will remind other communities that we fit under this diverse umbrella and deserve the same kind of respect as any other diverse community. Beautiful, absolutely. And I think there's something very special to our community in that we have this inherent intersectionality by the nature of who we are, and how childlessness does not just pick and choose the same like people and put them together. And I think that's a really powerful space that we're in terms of that. Yes, absolutely, being named as our community within that, a diverse community within the larger communities, and then also the diversity within our community. And so who do we get to be, again, going forward in this time of, as you say, accessibility and acceptability? Who will we be in creating access for people, in acceptance, in inclusion and diversity? Because we are all at this sort of table in our community. So who are we going to be in that? Again, will we repeat an external container, or will we again shift a new legacy within that? Oh, someone asked, is that to me? Do I do workshops? Yes, I do. Actually, I didn't really explain the work that I do, but a lot of the work that I do is coaching oriented, but it is with horses. And so I do individual work. I do executive things and work with small companies and organizations. But within the space of New Legacy Women, I also do individual sessions, but I do workshops, and I'm going to be doing one focusing on this in particular. And I'll also be launching a writing workshop. But I really believe in the power of having in-person spaces to do this work. And so I'm going to try to do them both online and in person. There will be those options available. And so most of my workshops I try to do outside with horses as much as possible, or in nature, having a nature component. So we'll see how we do the virtual ones and bring that in, so people can bring that. We'll still have the nature component, you'll just be doing that individually in your own lives. So thank you for asking, and you can always email me or call if you have any other questions. It's been really encouraging and enlightening. Thank you, Christine and Nikki. Yes, thank you, Nikki, for all your contributions and questions, and I appreciate that too. Empowering this session, really trying to remember that. I will remember that we will make our way in our own time. Yes, yes. Thank you for that. Thank you for all the beautiful recaps. You know who you are. I really appreciate it so much. Thank you for that. Yes, the sessions will be available for a while. And there's so many great sessions. I mean, I've only had a chance to watch a few, just given my schedule this week, but I'm hopefully going to make my way through all of them as well. I mean, people are doing brilliant, brilliant things. And the honesty and vulnerability and sharing our journeys, the insights that people have. Please, if you haven't already, watch the other webinars and listen to the conversations. Really, really, I feel like people really came to the table with a lot of authenticity and a lot to give, and I'm really grateful for that as well. It feels very, I feel much more in community as well, even though everything's virtual. It's been really powerful to see and to learn more about what other people are doing too, some of which I didn't know about. So yeah, wonderful. I just want to say thank you again, to Nikki and Andrew for organizing this, and for Brandy for all her work too, and making this possible. I really don't know how you've managed all the intricacies, but
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you mentioned Brandy, because Brandy has kept us sane, to make us laugh over the past few weeks as well. And we couldn't have done it without her help.
I was saying how New Legacy Women used to be the mother within, which is part of the title of the book I wrote a few years ago. And it's New Legacy Women is new, and it's reflective of all the things that we've talked about today, and where I am in my own life too, and where I've chosen to put my energies. And really, I believe that we're going to shape things not only for our own community, but for society as a whole and culturally. And I think that's really powerful. And even though it's a play on the word legacy, because I'm not standing in the tradition of legacy, but it is kind of a reclamation of that word and a redefining of it. And I think we are a part of a new legacy for the world, really. Let alone our communities and our own.
And I do have to just say thank you as well to all of the people who have been jumping on the chat as well. It's been absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much for participating in that way. And thank you so much for inspiring us also as well, Christine. It is absolutely brilliant. I knew that this was going to be a fascinating session, and I'm so pleased to have been involved in it.
Yeah. And to the participants in your brilliant writing in the comments, I appreciate it. It makes this palpable when I can't talk to anybody.
Yes. It is difficult, isn't it? Yes.
Conversation, I really appreciate it, and all of your engagement. So thank you so much.
Is there anything else that you want to add just before we go?
I think I just, I hope that this has given you something to think about, and really reflecting back, your own value to yourself. We are here, we are valuable. Those everyday things, your language, your actions, your choice, your self-care, all of those things matter. All of them matter. And you're absolutely valuable and worthy. And collectively, we are a powerful force.